Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive, the podcast that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside.
Let's dive in. What if the entire modern spiritual but not religious movement isn't a path to enlightenment, but maybe, just maybe, a perfectly engineered product, something for a lost and anxious generation?
Right. What if your soul's journey?
Right?
Well, what if it comes with a shopping cart?
That's exactly the question. It's the big one we're tackling today.
Yeah, we're calling this the spiritual shopping cart deep dive.
Yeah.
And our target. It's the specific architecture, the underlying structure of contemporary commercial mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
Look, we aren't here to judge the intentions necessarily, good intentions, bad intentions, whatever. Our job is to apply rigorous structural scrutiny, like an engineer looking at blueprints.
Exactly. Our mission is architectural. We want to understand the blueprint of these spiritual frameworks. We want to expose the foundational cracks, the weak points.
And trace the wiring, especially the commercial wiring. You know, see how the whole system is powered.
We're applying intense skeptical scrutiny, really drilling down into practices that come from these profound, sometimes ecstatic personal experiences people report.
We're not asking, does it feel good?
Hmm.
I mean, lots of things feel good. The question is it structurally sound? Is it built to last?
Right. We're looking at these practices that offer, immediate emotional validation, comfort, maybe?
But often they just don't hold up under the weight of logical analysis or even historical comparison.
It's like, if this spiritual framework was a building, a skyscraper even, would you actually invest your life savings in the penthouse suite?
Right. Would you trust the structure? We're here to see the engineer's report, basically. Let's see what's holding this thing up. Okay, so let's unpack this thing. Before we can really deconstruct it, we have to meticulously identify the pieces. You know, the foundational material, the load-bearing wall.
And maybe the decorative elements too, the stuff that makes it look appealing.
Exactly. If you strip away all the branding, the beautiful Instagram filters, the marketing language, what is actually left? What's the core structure?
And that's critical because the foundation dictates everything else, doesn't it? The whole structure rests on it.
Absolutely.
And the source material we looked at makes it pretty clear. The primary foundation for this whole modern movement is personal mystical experience. That's the bedrock.
And crucially, it's treated as the ultimate epistemological authority.
Okay, let's pause on that term, epistemological authority. It sounds technical, but it's so important here.
It really is the core vulnerability.
Yeah.
Epistemology is just as, well, it's the theory of knowledge. How do we know what we claim to know?
Right. How do we decide what's true or valid?
In, let's say, more traditional structures, authority might come from scripture, maybe, or from verifiable scientific data, or from, peer consensus in a field.
External sources, things you can check.
Exactly. But here, the personal feeling, that sudden insight, the emotional release, the aha moment, that is the fact. It becomes the sole, non-negotiable source of all valid knowledge.
Wow. So it's a fundamental shift. You're basically saying the source of reliable data moves from outside to inside.
Completely. Pretty much. It's like replacing the authority of the doctor's diagnosis with the authority of the patient's gut feeling about their illness.
Or swapping out the lab results for a really vivid dream you had.
That's a good analogy. The internal conviction becomes the data. If I feel it this strongly, it must be true. There's no need for external validation.
Which leads straight to the next point, right? The overall framework for knowledge.
Yeah, the epistemological framework itself. And it's explicitly anti-empirical. It has to be, given the foundation.
Anti-empirical, meaning it actively resists or dismisses external evidence, stuff you can measure or verify.
Precisely. It privileges subjective revelation, that internal feeling, a personal vision, maybe what they call a download, over anything verifiable or external.
So the leader, or even just the participant, they don't need peer review. They don't need objective validation.
Nope. Why would they? The internal experience is the validation. Full stop.
Okay. And what does that do to the authority structure, if truth is purely internal and subjective?
Well, it creates a really interesting dynamic. This movement often presents itself as rebelling against old, rigid authorities, priests, popes, dusty institutions.
Right, that's a big part of the appeal, anti-establishment.
But it doesn't actually get rid of authority. It just replaces the old kind with a new form, charismatic authority.
Ah, so the power shifts to the individual who claims the best connection.
Exactly. The power comes entirely from their claimed direct access to well, to spiritual channels, to divine wisdom, to the source, whatever they call it.
So the leader doesn't need credentials in the traditional sense. No degrees, no historical texts backing them up.
Not really, they just need to be really convincing. They need to persuade a large audience that they have the clearest line, the most direct connection to the universe's source code, basically.
And their personal subjective experience. That becomes the objective source material for potentially thousands of followers.
Based purely on their charisma, how sincere they seem, their claimed insights.
And because the source of knowledge is internal, unique to them, and fundamentally untestable,
It's incredibly effective for market penetration. Think about it. If the truth is inside the guru or channeled through the guru,
then you have to buy access to that guru's interpretation, to their products, their courses, their readings.
bingo. It sets up the commercial engine perfectly. Now let's look at the actual structure built on this foundation. The primary support pillars that hold the whole thing up. These are the tools, the practices, the concepts the movement offers.
Right, the tangible things people engage with.
It's usually quite comprehensive. Offers a whole toolkit for meaning, really. The first big pillar is often direct channeling.
Okay, so this isn't just like creative writing or getting inspired ideas.
Nope. It's positioned as something much more concrete.
Yeah.
A verifiable, reliable method for producing actual knowledge, like getting data delivered.
That sounds seductive. It promises perfect information, doesn't it? Bypassing all the messy work of research or critical thinking.
Exactly. The leader presents the information as downloaded directly from some higher source, angels, guides, ascended masters, the universe.
Oh.
It varies.
Which means it bypasses human fallibility. Air claims to.
That's the implication. And it immediately elevates the content above any real critique.
Yeah.
If you question the channeled message.
You're not just questioning the leader, you're questioning the cosmos itself, or you're accused of being closed off.
Right. Very effective defense mechanism. The second pillar is often creative expression.
How does that fit in? Like painting or writing?
Yeah, exactly. Things like painting, writing, dancing, singing. They're framed not just as hobbies or ways to release emotion, but as inherently spiritual practices.
Okay.
And often, engaging in these creative acts is presented as necessary. It's how you process or integrate the channeled knowledge you've received.
Ah, I see. Psychologically, that's quite clever, isn't it?
Absolutely genius. It legitimizes the follower's ego in a big way. You're not just passively consuming information.
You're an active participant, an artist, a sacred creator.
Right. It makes the whole spiritual journey feel productive, tangible, visceral. Gives you a sense of purpose and identity that maybe, say, passively sitting in a church pew didn't provide.
Okay, pillar 3.
That often focuses on the sacred feminine. This usually involves a deep connection to earth-based spirituality, maybe an emphasis on ancestral wisdom, the cycles of nature, that sort of thing.
This feels like a really important piece emotionally. It offers something different from traditional, often patriarchal religions.
Definitely. It provides a visceral, emotionally rich alternative. It connects the individual's personal journey to this grander, almost biological or ecological narrative. Gives it depth, historical weight, or the feeling of it anyway.
That feeling of belonging to some ancient lineage. That must be incredibly comforting, especially now when people feel so disconnected.
Hugely comforting. Even if the historical connections claimed are, let's say, abstract or not really substantiated by evidence, the feeling is potent.
Okay, what's the 4th pillar? You mentioned something ingenious.
Ah, yes. This one is structurally brilliant, especially for targeting a specific demographic. It's transformational parenting.
Transformational parenting. How does parenting become a spiritual pillar?
It reframes the entire experience. Child rearing is moved out of the stressful, often isolating domestic sphere,
Which it definitely can be.
and it's positioned as, essentially, the highest possible spiritual initiation,
Yeah.
a core part of your soul's evolution.
Wow. Okay, I can see how that would land. You're exploiting a major stress point.
Exactly. All the common difficulties of parenting, the sleep deprivation, the emotional burnout, the toddler tantrums, feeling like a failure.
Which every parent feels.
They get immediately reframed. They're no longer just struggles or failures. They become necessary spiritual shadow work, or maybe lessons derived from a soul contract you have with your child.
So the framework becomes indispensable right when people are most vulnerable, during those high-stress parenting years.
It becomes a survival manual, constantly validating their struggles, turning the exhaustion and chaos into evidence of divine purpose. It's incredibly effective at locking people in.
Okay, and the final pillar.
The polarity embrace. This is the idea, the structural requirement, really, that spiritual maturity comes from accepting and holding opposites.
Like light and dark, good and bad.
Exactly. Light and dark, masculine and feminine, fear and love, success and failure. You have to embrace the paradox, hold the tension.
Mm. What's fascinating there is, well, how does that function structurally?
It's a fantastic mechanism for defanging any criticism or failure within the system itself.
Yeah.
It makes the system almost immune to negative feedback.
How so?
Well, if the healing practice you paid for doesn't actually work,
Yeah.
it's not the practice's fault. It's because you weren't fully embracing your shadow aspects, or you weren't ready.
Okay. Or if you spend thousands on a retreat and still feel anxious or doubtful afterwards.
You're just holding the tension of the paradox. It's necessary for your future growth, you see. It protects the system.
It makes the system functionally unfalsifiable. Even on a personal, psychological level, any failure is just proof you need more of the system.
Precisely. Okay, so those are the big pillars, the load-bearing walls holding this thing up, resting on that foundation of subjective experience.
Now, what about the paint job, the decor, the things that make it feel good and maybe distract from those underlying issues?
Yes, the aesthetic and emotional cladding. This is crucial. These aren't just incidental details. They are the aesthetic decorative elements that create the emotional resonance and, frankly, mask the logical gaps.
This is where the commercial genius really comes in, isn't it? The packaging.
Absolutely. This is what convinces the consumer to buy into the structure, even if parts of it are questionable.
Okay, like what? Give us examples.
The heavy reliance on oracle cards is a perfect one. As divination tools, yes, but also as products.
They're everywhere now, beautifully designed too.
Exactly. They're not just books of wisdom. They're tactile, interactive products. They become the daily touch point with the system. They make abstract ideas feel accessible, playful.
And crucially, they are repeat purchasable items. You buy one deck, then another, then another.
It's the perfect entry-level, sticky product. But what really papers over the cracks in the logic is the poetic language.
The way things are phrased.
The language itself is often specifically engineered to obscure or mask logical gaps. When the actual claims are vague or contradictory, or maybe just impossible.
The language becomes really evocative, inspirational.
Emotional. Deeply emotionally resonant. It fills the logical void with feeling. It sounds profound, even if when you dissect it, it doesn't actually say anything concrete or testable.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think of the difference between saying, the mechanism for self-realization we propose is self-referential and cannot be externally verified because it relies on subjective states. That sounds weak, right?
Yeah, clinical. Doesn't sell.
Versus saying something like, the soul's sacred journey unfolds when you courageously turn inward, holding the luminous tension of the paradox and embracing the liminal space where the quantum whispers meet the divine feminine.
Okay, yeah. One is a structural weakness warning. The other sounds like beautiful marketing copy for a spa retreat.
Exactly. And this is reinforced by the high-end beauty and design aesthetic.
The visuals, the branding.
High-quality graphic design, clean logos, professional photography, expensive-looking websites, and product packaging. It all creates an immediate feeling of trust and connection.
Our brains are kind of wired for that, aren't they? We equate slick presentation with competence or quality.
We do. If the packaging looks like a luxury item, we unconsciously assume the content inside must be equally sound, equally valuable, even if the actual content is just, repackaged New Age cliches from the 70s.
Okay, and the last element here, the final piece of the aesthetic puzzle.
Maybe the most powerful one for marketing.
Mm.
The reliance on personal narrative as a substitute for verifiable evidence.
The leader's story.
The teacher, the guru, the influencer. They share their own raw, often painful story, how they overcame darkness, illness, poverty, whatever, using these specific methods.
And that single story, that anecdote, is presented as the proof.
As universal proof that the method works for everyone. The structure is always, I was broken, I found channeled this method, I transformed, therefore you can too if you buy my system.
It completely bypasses the need for actual data, doesn't it? No need for large-scale studies or clinical trials or rigorous checks.
The only proof required is the emotional impact of the leader's testimonial. If their story resonates with your pain, you buy in. #3. Critical structural vulnerabilities. The system failure.
Okay, so we've laid out the architecture. Shaky foundation of subjective feelings, held up by these pillars of unverified claims, and then dressed up beautifully in poetic language and slick design.
Pretty much sums it up.
Now it's time to expose the fault lines. Let's bring the logical dismantling. Where do we start with the hard logic?
We have to start with the most fundamental flaw, epistemologically speaking. It's what philosophers of science call the problem of unfalsifiable claims.
Unfalsifiable, meaning you can't even imagine an experiment or evidence that could prove it wrong.
Exactly. If a claim cannot, even in principle, be disproven, it operates entirely outside the realm of evidence. It's not useful knowledge. It's dogma.
And the core claims here fall into that category. Channeling, visions.
Absolutely. Things like channeling specific entities, receiving divine downloads, having prophetic visions, these cannot be tested in any meaningful way.
Okay, walk me through that. If I tell you I received an ancient cosmic truth last night from a fifth-dimensional being named Zorp.
Right. Zorp. Classic.
How could you possibly test the validity of Zorp's existence or the reliability of my connection to him?
You can't. And any attempt you make to disprove it can be immediately dismissed by you, the claimant. You just say,
oh, well, you're just not vibrating at a high enough frequency to perceive Zorp, or your ego is blocking the transmission.
Exactly. The claim is perfectly insulated from any empirical challenge, the closed loop.
Yep.
And if the practice promises success, but success is only defined by internal feelings, do you feel activated? Do you feel lighter?
Then any failure isn't a failure of the system.
It's redefined as a necessary step within the system, or a failure of the user. The structural immunity to criticism is a massive, massive logical vulnerability.
And this immunity, this unfalsifiability, it allows for the next huge logical jump, doesn't it?
It does. The universalization of subjective experience.
Taking one person's aha moment and making it a universal law.
Precisely. It's the leap from a potentially profound but highly personal and individual moment of insight or emotion to presenting that very specific experience as a generalized, objective truth that applies to every single human being on the planet.
I often wonder about the intent there. Is the leader consciously doing that, or are they just so swept up in the intensity of their own experience?
That they genuinely can't imagine it isn't universal. Yeah, it's hard to say. Could be cynical, could be sincere self-delusion, but structurally, the result is the same.
My very specific, emotionally charged dream is now marketed as the blueprint for your entire life path.
Ignoring all the vast differences in our psychology, our culture, our life circumstances, our brain chemistry, everything.
And to make this seem like it works, to create the illusion of proof, they have to lower the bar for what counts as evidence, right?
Drastically lower their evidence standards. The heavy reliance on anecdotal transformation stories is just, well, it's completely insufficient for any kind of serious structural analysis.
So someone saying, my life totally changed when I started using this oracle deck, that's not proof.
It's proof that the person believes their life changed and they attribute it to the deck. It's a correlation. It absolutely does not prove that the specific channeled message on the card was objectively true or from Zorp.
Right.
Or even that the deck itself was the sole cause of the change. It could easily be placebo or the community effect or just the emotional release of finally doing something.
So this creates what you called the verification gap.
A massive one. There was no mechanism built into the system, none whatsoever, for distinguishing genuine insight, if we allow for that possibility, from simple internal illusion or wishful thinking or confirmation bias or even just straight-up self-deception.
Because the only judge is the internal feeling.
If the only measure of truth is how good or how activated or how resonant it feels to you, how do you ever course correct? What happens when you feel really good about something that's actually destructive or based on a complete falsehood?
You can't. The system has no brakes, no quality control.
Fundamentally broken from an epistemological standpoint. It lacks any external check on reality.
Okay, so the logical structure is shaky. But this is where it gets really fascinating and kind of contradictory, isn't it? The commercial side.
The heart of the paradox.
Yeah.
The structural hypocrisy.
Yeah, because this whole movement often talks a big game about rejecting materialism, finding freedom from the consumer world.
But it's fundamentally deeply tied to consumerism. It runs on it. What we see is productized mysticism.
Spiritual experiences themselves, carefully sliced up, packaged, and sold as items you can buy.
It's the core paradox laid bare. You are sold a system that tells you the truth is already inside you. You have all the answers.
Right.
Empowering message. But to access that truth that's already inside you, well, you need to buy our specialized tools, our copyrighted courses, our certifications, usually from the very people who told you the truth was free and internal.
So the soul's journey requires a credit card.
And often, repeat transactions. It's the subscription model for enlightenment.
Let's break down how that monetization actually works based on the sources. It seems layered.
Very layered. You usually have the low-cost, high-volume entry point, the impulse buy.
Like the Oracle decks and the initial books, the pretty ones by the checkout.
Exactly. Priced attractively, maybe $30 to $60.
Yeah.
Easy to justify. This is the consumer's first purchase. It's the beautifully designed anchor that keeps them connected to the system daily.
It's like the spiritual equivalent of downloading a free-to-play app, maybe. Gets you hooked.
Good analogy. And that initial purchase is designed to create a dependency on the system's specific language, its unique symbols, its iconography. It primes the customer for the upsell.
The mid to high-level offerings.
Right, because if you want real spiritual depth, if you want to become an expert yourself, maybe even teach this stuff,
Then you need the certification programs.
which can range from hundreds to, more often, thousands of dollars.
And this is where it gets really interesting structurally, isn't it? It's not just about selling knowledge.
It's about monetizing authority itself.
Right.
Think about it. These programs often teach methods based solely on the leader's subjective, unverified channeling.
Okay.
Yet they charge you, the student, hefty fees for the privilege of using the system's name, its structure, its branding. Suddenly, spiritual authority isn't divinely granted or earned through years of study and service.
It's institutionally gated and commercially gated. You buy your authority.
You literally buy your certificate of spiritual expertise. And it gets worse. These programs often create a dynamic that feels very much like multi-level marketing, an MLM scheme.
How?
The consumer, the person paying for the certification, is effectively turned into a competitor who is paid for the right to teach the same material. They become unpaid, or rather, they paid to be, sales representatives for the core methodology.
So they pay the leader for the right to go out and sell the leader's system to their own network.
Exponentially increasing the original leader's reach and revenue with almost zero additional overhead for the leader. It's a financially brilliant, if ethically questionable, structure.
Okay, and then there's the top tier.
The premium experience,
Yeah.
the deep dive with the master. This is where the courses and retreats come in, often with a premium pricing structure.
Thousands, sometimes tens of thousands for a weekend.
Easily. The high price signals exclusivity, depth, transformation. It solidifies the commercial gatekeeping, the deepest insights, the most profound activations. They're explicitly available only to those who can afford the platinum package.
Which inherently links spiritual attainment to your economic status. The exact opposite of what most genuine spiritual traditions teach.
It creates the perfect definition of consumption spirituality. It's this paradoxical claim that sacred connection, something supposedly internal, universal, available to anyone, anywhere,
Right, the monk in the cave, the student in the library.
actually requires the purchase of specialized, often copyrighted commercial products and services. Spirituality shifts from being an internal state to an external transaction that needs constant renewal.
It's like you said, spiritual fast food. You get that quick hit, you feel like you did something spiritual because you bought something.
But you leave still hungry for actual sustainable depth. You need the next product, the next course.
And the success of these products, the sales figures, that gets twisted into proof, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This is authority through commerce. The market success itself, the bestseller lists, the number of followers, the sheer volume of Oracle decks sold that becomes the definitive proof. The validation that the spiritual teachings are true or powerful.
So if millions of people buy the product, it must be legit.
That's the dangerous implication. Market validation replaces rigorous spiritual or empirical validation. The entire structure becomes beholden to quarterly sales reports and social media engagement metrics, rather than any kind of existential rigor or verifiable outcomes. And this whole commercial engine, this productized spirituality, it's designed to be completely self-sustaining. A perfectly sealed, self-referential system. We call it the validation loop.
Okay. A loop. It sounds like it just feeds itself.
That's exactly what it does. It creates this powerful illusion of structural integrity, of proof, without needing any external grounding. No reality checks required.
Okay, walk us through the steps of this loop. How does it keep going, even if the core claims are maybe illogical or unproven?
Right. It starts always with the leader's personal experience, the initial channeling, the vision, the download. Step one.
Which needs to be validated somehow.
But since it can't be validated scientifically or externally, it's quickly converted into a creative product.
Yeah.
Step two. That's the book, the course,
Yeah.
the Oracle deck, the workshop.
Got it. Experience becomes product.
That product then enters the marketplace. Driven by effective marketing, the personal narrative, the aesthetics we talked about, it achieves market success. Step three. High sales, Large community forms around it, lots of buzz.
And that success, the sales figures, the popularity, that becomes the proof.
And that becomes the definitive, quantifiable proof that the original channeled message, the personal experience, must have been true or valid. Why else would so many people buy it?
Okay. So the market validates the mysticism.
Precisely. Which then leads to step 4. That market success is interpreted by both the leader and the followers as undeniable proof of the leader's spiritual authority. They're not just a successful entrepreneur anymore. They're seen as a genuine spiritual master, validated by the marketplace.
And that enhanced authority, does that feed back into the start of the loop?
Directly. Step 5. The leaders recognize spiritual authority enhances their confidence, their platform, their perceived connection, which fuels their ability to have even more profound, enhanced personal experiences. More downloads, more confident channeling.
Which starts the whole cycle over again. More experiences lead to more products, driving more sales, reinforcing authority. Wow.
It's the absolute essence of circular proof. The products validate the channeling, which validates the products. Round and round it goes.
Okay, but wait. On a purely practical level, isn't this loop kind of what every successful brand does? Apple makes a product, it sells well, that enhances Apple's authority, which lets them make more products. What makes it uniquely dangerous in a spiritual context?
That is a great question. The critical difference is the external reference lack.
Meaning?
In the normal commercial world, even a super successful brand like Apple eventually has to produce a phone that, actually makes calls. A car company has to make a car that drives safely. There's an external, physical, verifiable reality check. The product has to do something objectively measurable.
Okay, but here,
the spiritual product's functionality, does it bring enlightenment? Does it connect you to Zorp? Is entirely subjective. It happens inside the user's head.
so there's no way to independently verify if the product actually works according to its core spiritual claims.
None whatsoever. This absence of independent, verifiable mechanisms allows the validation loop to run infinitely on pure internal affirmation and market signals. You simply cannot test the validity of the core premise from the outside.
And this structural weakness, this lack of external checks, it's kind of hidden by the community itself, isn't it?
Completely masked by the community echo chambers. When you have thousands of people in an expensive online course or a private Facebook group all sharing stories about how they've been activated or how the oracle cards changed their life.
That shared experience feels incredibly real and validating.
It substitutes for empirical reality. The immediate group affirmation, the consensus within the bubble, becomes the only proof needed, and critically, there are no external objective benchmarks required.
Plus, everyone in that group has a vested interest in believing, right? They've likely spent significant money, time, emotional energy.
Exactly. The shared financial and emotional investment makes it incredibly difficult for any individual inside the group to critically question the system. Doing so risks not just social exile from the supportive community, but also admitting that their own investment might have been misplaced. It's easier to double down on belief. Now, it's really crucial for you, the listener, to realize this structure, this architecture we've just dissected, it might look new and shiny with its social media gloss.
But it's not new at all, is it?
Not even slightly. It follows a very predictable pattern, an architectural template that we've seen crop up repeatedly throughout history.
And looking at those historical precedents, it serves as a pretty clear warning sign, doesn't it? Shows the inherent systemic vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. We've mapped the current terrain. Now let's use history as our guide to expose those recurring fault lines. We're looking at past movements that shared these exact same structural pillars.
Okay, so subjective experience as ultimate authority, charismatic leadership based on claimed special access, and commodified insight selling the spiritual goods.
Precisely. And most importantly, we need to look at how and why those earlier structures ultimately collapsed or faded. The first and maybe the most obvious parallel is 19th century spiritualism. Think seances, mediums, contacting the dead.
Right. Emerged during a time of huge social upheaval, anxiety, scientific change. Sounds kind of familiar.
Very familiar. And the similarities are striking. Spiritualism featured mediumship.
Which is basically identical to modern direct channeling, isn't it?
Functionally, yes.
Yeah.
Someone claims to be a conduit for information from another realm. Spiritualism also relied heavily on oracular tools, messages wrapped out on tables, automatic writing, spirit trumpets.
Okay.
And critically, its immense popularity was driven by the deep emotional validation it offered, especially to people grieving losses from war or disease. It exploited a powerful, genuine human need for connection and meaning.
So the structure looks very similar. How did it fall apart?
Well, its collapse is the really instructive part. The main collapse causes were, number one, increasing scientific scrutiny. People started asking for proof under controlled conditions.
Like magicians, investigators. Harry Houdini famously debunked mediums.
Exactly. Number two, widespread exposure of fraud. Turned out many of the spirit manifestations were just clever stage magic, parlor tricks, outright scams designed to prey on the grieving.
Okay.
And number three, just a sheer lack of consistent, verifiable results over time. The promises didn't hold up. When external standards, objective verification were applied, the whole structure just crumbled.
Because its foundation was built purely on subjective experience and unverifiable claims, it couldn't withstand external testing.
Revealed the spiritual downloads were often just performance. Okay, next historical precedent, the New Thought movement.
This is late 19th, early 20th century. It includes things like mind cure, prosperity gospel precursors.
Yes, exactly. Groups like Unity, Christian Science to some extent, and various metaphysical practitioners. New Thought shared that intense focus on personal transformation through mental power.
The idea that your thoughts create your reality. Positive thinking brings health and wealth.
That's the core. Specialized mental practices, affirmations, claiming that thought alone could directly manifest material results. An entirely mental solution proposed for very real material problems.
This sounds incredibly similar to modern manifestation culture, law of attraction stuff.
It's the direct ancestor. But again, look at the structural vulnerability. Its decline or fragmentation was largely caused by a failed delivery on promises and inconsistent outcomes.
People didn't actually get magically rich or healthy just by thinking positively.
Generally, no. You simply cannot sustain a system long-term when its core guarantees guaranteed health, guaranteed wealth, perfect results just from belief repeatedly fail to materialize for the vast majority of followers.
And how did the system cope with that failure? Did it adjust?
Mostly, it resorted to victim blaming. If you didn't get rich, it wasn't because the system was flawed. It was because your belief wasn't strong enough. Your thoughts weren't pure enough. You failed the system. The system didn't fail you. Sound familiar?
Depressingly familiar. Shifts the blame entirely onto the user who already paid. Okay, one more historical example.
Let's go deeper, more classical. Neoplatonist mysticism. Ancient philosophy, but with mystical offshoots.
Like Plotinus, Iamblichus, focusing on direct union with the One.
Exactly. Structurally, it shared that strong focus on achieving direct divine connection, the importance of subjective interpretation of reality, and the necessity of personal gnosis, or direct intuitive revelation.
So again, subjective experience is paramount.
But the inherent structural weakness, which played out over centuries, was that by prioritizing individual subjective revelation over any kind of objective standard or shared text,
It led to fragmentation.
total fragmentation and a complete lack of cohesive agreed-upon truth claims, when everyone's unique vision, their personal interpretation, is treated as equally valid and absolutely true.
You end up with a million different, often contradictory truths.
And zero shared, workable reality. The system eventually tears itself apart because there's no anchor point, no external reference to hold the diverse truth claims together in any coherent way.
Okay, so what this history lesson really shows us is that the modern commercial framework we're dissecting, it isn't new, and it has basically baked in the exact same vulnerabilities that caused these older systems to crumble.
The same three core weaknesses: unfalsifiability, protecting it from critique, shifting the blame onto the user when promises fail, and elevating purely subjective interpretation to the status of universal law, leading to incoherence. History suggests this architecture is inherently unstable.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time showing what doesn't work structurally, what tends to collapse, but we don't want to just leave you there. It's important to show that there are robust alternatives.
Frameworks that allow for deep inner exploration and meaning, but are built on more solid ground, built on systematic verification, accountability.
And crucially, frameworks that pursue depth without necessarily needing a shopping cart attached.
Right. Let's look at a few examples of what successful, durable, spiritual, or philosophical architectures look like. The first great example is the Buddhist contemplative tradition.
Buddhism obviously focuses deeply on internal experience, meditation, the nature of consciousness.
Immensely so. But it operates with a profound sense of epistemological humility. It's deeply aware of the mind's capacity for self-deception.
So it encourages a skeptical approach even towards one's own meditative experiences.
Highly skeptical. If a practitioner claims to have reached a certain deep state of concentration or had a particular insight, A qualified teacher who has ideally attained that state themselves can use systematic verification methods.
Whoa.
By checking for specific, documented characteristics and markers associated with that state, there are established maps of consciousness developed over centuries. There are also explicit teacher-student accountability structures designed precisely to guard against self-deception, spiritual bypassing, illusion, and delusion.
The very flaws that seem baked into the commercial mysticism we analyzed.
Exactly. In Buddhism, the verification isn't based on how much money you manifest or how activated you feel after a workshop. It's based on internal consistency, observable ethical behavior, and measurable reduction of suffering, tested over time within a lineage.
Okay, that's a powerful contrast. What's another robust model?
Let's look at Stoic pragmatic philosophy, ancient Greece and Rome.
Stoicism feels very different, much more focused on ethics and action in the world.
Entirely. It focuses on verifiable practices with immediately measurable outcomes in the real world. Things like emotional regulation, developing resilience under stress, improving your capacity for objective judgment.
And it avoids the big metaphysical claims.
It's fundamentally resistant to uncheckable metaphysical claims about gods or channeling or past lives. The proof of Stoicism isn't in the amazing vision you receive on your meditation cushion.
It's in your actual behavior, how you handle adversity.
Precisely. It's in your improved, auditable behavior and your demonstrable tranquility in daily life. If the practice works, your life measurably improves in terms of character, consistency, and service to the community. You can see the results.
You can audit a Stoic's life by observing their reactions, their choices, but you can't really audit a channeler's cosmic download from Zorp.
Exactly. The verification is external and behavioral. Okay, one more. Jungian scientific mysticism offers a fascinating middle ground.
Carl Jung, psychology but with a deep respect for myth, symbol, the unconscious, the mystical side of the psyche.
Right. Jung took subjective experience seriously, but he didn't abandon rigor. His method relied on the empirical documentation of cross-cultural patterns.
How did he do that?
He collected vast amounts of subjective evidence, patients' dreams, cultural myths, religious symbols, alchemical texts from all over the world across history, and he looked for recurring patterns, convergences, archetypes.
So he maintained a critical balance between respecting the inner world and demanding evidence.
He tried to. For Jung, your personal vision, your powerful dream, it's significant, yes, but it's only truly meaningful or scientifically interesting if it aligns with these documented, recurring patterns observed across many cultures and individuals. It has to connect to the collective.
So it moves the claim from, this is true just because I saw it,
to something more like, this personal subjective experience is psychologically significant and worth studying because it seems to be a specific manifestation of a consistent, documented, collective human pattern. It grounds the mystical in observable cross-cultural data. Okay, so the desire for meaning, for connection, for profound experience, that's genuine. We're not questioning that impulse.
But the current dominant commercially optimized scaffolding that's being sold to meet that need, we've argued it's structurally unsound, flimsy even.
So how do we renovate? How do we take that valuable impulse and build something better around it? Strip away the flimsy, commercially driven architecture.
We need architectural renovations, ones that prioritize rigor over revenue, durability over hype.
Where do we start? Foundational work first. The absolute first renovation, the most fundamental one, is reinforcing the foundation with epistemological humility.
Back to how we know what we know. Humility, meaning acknowledging the limits of our knowing, especially when it comes to subjective states.
Precisely. It means rigorously, constantly distinguishing between subjective experience, what I felt, what I saw in my vision, what resonated with me, and actual objective truth claims, what is demonstrably true for everyone, regardless of how they feel.
That distinction feels crucial.
It's everything. Mystical experiences, powerful intuitions, moments of insight. They need to be understood and framed differently. Not as immutable facts delivered from on high.
But as interpretations, as hypotheses maybe?
Exactly. Your vision isn't divine law that needs to be immediately packaged and sold. It's a profound, maybe meaningful, but still highly personalized lens through which you are currently viewing reality. It's data point, perhaps. It's the beginning of a deeper inquiry, not the final authoritative answer.
And this reframing, it allows for bringing in other forms of evidence, doesn't it?
It demands it. It allows us to incorporate evidence-based elements alongside personal revelations to actually ground the framework.
So if you claim a certain meditation technique leads to better mental health or less anxiety,
You can't just rely on testimonials saying people feel better. You need to be able to point to psychological studies, or track measurable outcomes over time using validated instruments, or compare results against a control group. We demand external validation to support the internal claim. It reintegrates the subjective with the objective.
Okay, so we reinforce the foundation with humility and evidence. Now, what about those load-bearing pillars we identified earlier? The channeling, the ancestral stuff, the oracles? Do we just tear them down?
Not necessarily tear down the impulse behind them, but replace the flawed mechanism with something more robust. This is about preserving the valuable psychological function these pillars serve, while replacing the faulty logic that makes them easily monetizable and resistant to critique.
Okay, let's go through them. Pillar 1 was channeling as knowledge, the claim of getting perfect info downloads.
The dangerous claim undermines critical thinking.
The replacement pillar we propose is intuition as hypothesis generation.
Explain that. How is it different?
It still values that spark of creative insight, that gut feeling, that aha moment. It acknowledges that good ideas can come from nonlinear places. But
it treats that intuition not as infallible truth, but as a hypothesis, a starting point.
exactly. An idea to be explored, tested, maybe developed artistically, but crucially, it remains open to falsification. You take your intuitive hypothesis out into the real world. Does it work? Does it yield constructive, consistent results? Does it align with other evidence?
And if it doesn't?
Then the hypothesis is modified, refined, or maybe even discarded. It keeps the creative spark, but adds the essential feedback loop of reality testing.
Okay, that makes sense. Next, the original pillar of ancestral memory. The vague, uncheckable claims about past lives, inherited trauma from ancient lineages, often tied into the sacred feminine stuff.
Right. This taps into a real feeling many people have of carrying burdens or patterns that don't feel entirely their own.
But the mystical explanation is untestable.
So we replace it with the pillar of intergenerational trauma patterns.
Grounding it in psychology and sociology.
Exactly. This framework acknowledges and honors that profound, often heavy emotional experience of connection to family history. But it uses robust, evidence-based concepts from psychology and trauma studies to understand it.
So when people feel that burden, instead of sending them to an expensive workshop to channel their mystical ancestor ghost,
We use proven methods of trauma analysis, family systems therapy, maybe even epigenetics research to understand how patterns of behavior, belief, and even physiological stress responses can be transmitted across generations. It honors the deep experience but uses verifiable science.
okay? And the third replacement. The original was the oracle as guidance, using cards or other tools for definitive answers or future predictions.
Again, very appealing. People want answers, guidance.
But framed as magic, it bypasses personal responsibility and critical thinking.
The replacement pillar is art as contemplation tool.
Art, not oracle. How does that work?
It preserves the powerful symbolic engagement that makes oracle decks so attractive. The imagery, the archetypes. They can be powerful mirrors, but the framing changes entirely.
So the card you draw is no longer a magic message delivered from Zorp or the universe dictating your path.
No, it's a beautifully designed piece of art, a symbol that acts as a prompt, a mirror to help you access your own unconscious thoughts, explore your internal conflicts, stimulate your creative problem-solving capacities.
You engage with the symbolism for reflection, for self-inquiry.
But you remain the sole, final authority on its meaning and relevance to your life. Not the piece of cardboard, and certainly not the guru who designed the deck and sells the accompanying $500 course on how to interpret it correctly. It puts the power back with the individual.
So if we replace those shaky pillars and reinforce the foundation, what do the new, more robust structures actually look like in practice? If we tear down the commercial temple, what do we build instead?
We need concrete, non-commodified models for genuine spiritual or existential inquiry. Models that rely on rigor, transparency, and community, not blind faith or expensive paywalls.
Based on our analysis, we propose 3 potential models. The first we call the laboratory of experience.
Laboratory. Sounds scientific.
Intentionally. In this model, spiritual practices, meditation techniques, ethical disciplines, contemplative exercises are treated not as articles of faith within a belief system.
But as documented experiments.
Exactly. As experiment in consciousness. This means emphasizing rigorous outcome tracking. If you try a practice, you document the process and the results, ideally using objective measures where possible.
It also implies peer review, doesn't it? Sharing results, getting feedback.
Absolutely. But peer review, of the methods and results, not just shared testimonials in an echo chamber. And crucially, hypothesis testing. If you claim a specific breathwork technique leads to reduced rumination.
You need to define rumination, measure it before and after, maybe compare your results with others using the exact same documented protocol.
We start treating consciousness itself as a potentially verifiable, observable field of study, using first-person data but demanding methodological rigor. Okay, second model, the gallery of human connection.
Gallery. This sounds more artistic, communal.
It focuses on creative work writing, visual arts, music, performance, but it reframes the purpose. Creative output is seen not as wisdom delivered from a single enlightened source.
But as shared exploration and collaborative meaning-making.
Exactly. The authority becomes democratic and distributed. When someone creates an insightful poem, a moving piece of music, or even a beautiful contemplative deck of images.
It's the start of a community conversation and interpretation, not the final word.
Precisely. It moves away from the top-down, one-to-many guru dynamic towards a collective, ongoing, shared pursuit of meaning and understanding, sparked by creative expression. More like a seminar than a sermon.
Okay, and the third model.
The observatory of patterns. This one builds on that Jungian idea we discussed.
Looking for recurring themes across cultures and history.
Right. It focuses on systematic, cross-cultural documentation and pattern recognition, using evidence-based mapping of consciousness phenomena. It requires serious anthropological, historical, and psychological rigor.
So we map human experience myths, rituals, contemplative states, ethical codes across time and culture, looking for what seems truly universal or deeply resonant about the human condition.
And carefully separating those deep patterns from the specific, culturally packaged, often commercially motivated products being sold today. We seek convergence through careful data analysis, not consensus generated through marketing or charismatic authority.
These renovated models sound promising. Laboratory, gallery, observatory. They emphasize rigor, community, evidence, but putting them into practice means confronting those core paradoxes created by the commercial system head-on. This is where implementation often fails.
It's the hardest part, because it requires challenging, deeply ingrained habits and financial structures.
The first, absolutely critical step is a massive sustained language shift. We talked about poetic language masking gaps.
We need to actively move away from definitive, authoritative language, like channeled truth or divine download,
Towards more humble, accurate phrasing like inspired interpretation, intuitive hypothesis, or personal symbolic resonance.
It seems like a small semantic difference, but epistemologically, it's huge. It shifts the burden of proof correctly back onto the person making the claim, and it opens the door for testing and dialogue, rather than shutting it down with appeals to unquestionable authority.
Second, we need a really transparent audit of that authority versus accessibility tension.
The commercial gatekeeping problem.
Any genuine transition pathway towards these more robust models must dismantle the financial barriers to core teachings. If a practice or insight is claimed to be truly transformative, truly for the liberation or healing of the soul,
then the essential knowledge, the core practice itself, cannot be locked behind a $1,500 certification program or a premium-priced retreat ticket. That's just basic structural integrity. Genuine wisdom, if claimed, needs to be shared openly and accessibly. Maybe advanced training costs something, but the fundamentals, they should be available.
it requires decoupling spiritual value from price tag, a radical shift for this industry.
Hugely radical. And finally, we need clear, measurable evaluation metrics for any proposed framework or practice. What does success actually look like beyond feeling good or selling products?
Future frameworks need to prioritize consistency checks. Are the teachings internally coherent? Do they remain stable over time, or do they constantly shift to match market trends or explain away failures?
And most importantly, outcome verification. Are there documented, measurable benefits that extend beyond subjective self-reporting and positive testimonials within the bubble?
If the practice promises less anxiety, better relationships, more compassion, the result should be, at least in principle, verifiable, consistent across practitioners, and ideally measurable by somewhat objective standards over time. We need proof beyond the hype. Hashtag tagwise. Conclusion.
So let's synthesize. We've deconstructed the architecture of much modern commercial mysticism. We've seen it often relies on a structurally vulnerable foundation, subjective feeling mistakenly treated as objective, universal truth.
It uses powerful tools, poetic language, beautiful aesthetics, compelling personal narratives to mask significant epistemological gaps and logical inconsistencies.
And it thrives on a perfectly sealed commercial validation loop. the spiritual shopping cart, where market success, sales figures become the primary and often only form of proof for spiritual claims.
We've also seen this isn't new. This architectural pattern mirrors historical movements like 19th century spiritualism and New Thought, whose collapses highlight the inherent instability of systems built on untestable claims and unmet promises.
But the encouraging part is that robust alternatives exist. Models like Buddhist skepticism, Stoic pragmatism, or even Jung's empirical approach to mysticism show that it is possible to pursue profound insight, meaning, and inner work.
While maintaining intellectual rigor, demanding evidence, cultivating humility, and crucially, without succumbing to commercial dependency or charismatic manipulation.
The core principle for Reconstruction is clear. Any spiritual or philosophical framework aiming for lasting integrity must be strong enough to withstand both the power of ecstatic, subjective experience and the rigorous scrutiny of logic, evidence, and history. Don't settle for the easy, beautiful answer if it dissolves under a hard, logical question.
And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. What's something you once believed was spiritual that you now realize was just clever packaging?
Let us know in the comments. Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical. Thank you for joining us.